What is up? Welcome to Pistons Talk Podcast. Hope you guys are having a great Tuesday night. In today's episode, what we'll be discussing, ESPN talked about the Pistons. We're going to be playing some audio clips. They also touched on Jaden Ivey and some possible trades the Pistons could possibly make mid-season. Preseason schedule is officially out. We'll be going over that, kind of looking at the teams that the Detroit Pistons will be playing. And we'll finish the podcast off with some Jaden Ivey clips. He had his, what was it? I think it was just a basketball camp here locally at the UWN complex in Pontiac, Michigan. There's a clip of him, and I wanted to play it for you guys because I think a lot of the doubts that we had with the leg injury can probably get laid to rest. But let's get into today's episode. Let's start with the ESPN portion of this podcast. So this is Tim McMahon talking about the Detroit Pistons this upcoming season and his expectations.
I like them as a team that will continue to improve. They did lose some key bench pieces. They lost Malik Beasley to his own stupidity. They lost Tim Hardaway Jr., who they, essentially allowed to leave, sign a minimum with Denver, and then they lost Schroeder. Jaden Ivey, I think, more than makes up for the absence of Schroeder. They brought in Duncan Robinson to, replace Beasley as that volume 3-point shooter, and the gravity that creates, the space that creates for Cade Cunningham in particular. But I'm going to bet on continued improvement from Cade Cunningham, who proved he is a legit face of a franchise last year. Who's I think ascending superstar is fair. I think Jalen Duren is one of the most dynamic young bigs in the league, who is also going to continue to improve. Ivy was playing well before he went down. So I like this young core. I like the job J.B. Bickerstaff obviously did last year, and I think they'll bump it up a few more. Asar Thompson, I think, also is going to continue to improve. So I think they bump it up a few more wins.
So the over-under in Vegas right now for the Detroit Pistons as of August 5th is 45.5. And that was the conversation they were having. Do they see the Pistons, going over or under? And a majority of that panel said, I think they'll go over by a few games. And I tend to agree with them. I think this is a 50-win basketball team. I know some people don't feel that way. They feel like the Pistons got worse this season. I don't really see it that way. I think Caris LeVert is very versatile. You can use him in a lot of creative different ways. I think Duncan Robinson moving off the basketball is huge. Not only that, I think he's a very underrated passer, and him finishing at the rim is kind of an underrated skill that not a lot of people talk about. So I do think this team is going to look different. And I think they'll still be on pace to be at least a top 5 team in the East this year. There's a couple things that Tim McMahon did touch on. I love him giving Jalen Duren his flowers, saying, he's one of the up-and-coming, centers in this league, and he's going to continue to get better. I tend to agree with that, especially in the playoffs. Jalen Duren really showed me when Isaiah Stewart was out, all you had was Paul Reed as a backup center. He showed the ability to not only play high minutes, but he didn't really have the luxury of getting into foul trouble, and he really had to lock in those games. And I think we saw a lot of flashes from JD this year. After, around the 30-game mark this season, defensively, he shows flashes of staying in front of people, shows flashes of protecting the rim. The passing, I think, has gotten better and better each and every year. And there's videos that have surfaced out this offseason of him trying to develop a jump shot, a mid-range jump shot, a 3-point jump shot. So I think he will continue to get better and grow with this young core. Tim also kind of touched on Cade Cunningham, and I think it's just something that everyone talks about. Like, Cade Cunningham showed, this past season, that he's a franchise guy, that he's one of the best players in the NBA, one of the best point guards in the NBA. I tend to agree with Tim there. But, they believe that the Pistons will smash that over. It is currently set at 45.5. Now, Brian Windhorst touched on Jaden Ivey. And we're going to play this clip from Brian Windhorst talking about Jaden Ivey.
Ivey is one of the more interesting players to watch in the Eastern Conference last year. He really was looking like he was going to ramp up and be kind of the player that they thought they were drafting him high in the lottery. And so what he is able to do, when he got injured last year, they didn't rule out that he could come back at the end of the season. In fact, they didn't even apply for a disabled player exception because they thought he was going to come back. But the point is, by the time the season starts, he should have been fully healthy for 6 months. So I expect him to really get going. And he's a guy that if he, continues elevating, can really be a difference-making player because that backcourt play could be big.
I'm so glad Brian Windhorst said that about Jaden Ivey. I feel like a lot of the discourse with him, there's both sides of the fence, and I see you guys commenting on these podcasts. I interact with you guys across different social media platforms, whether that's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, even TikTok a little bit. Brian's right. Jaden Ivey showed a lot of promise. He's starting to come into his own. And then he had that injury that kind of ended the season. Cole Anthony decided to just be reckless and dive at his leg. But I think what Brian said is really important. He said, he can be a real difference maker. I mean, if he has a season where he looks like he can be that number 2 option next to Cade Cunningham, this backcourt could be one of the better backcourts, not only in the Eastern Conference, but in the NBA. And I know, some people need to see more of a sample size from Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham, and I understand that. But when you talk about a guy in Jaden Ivey that not only excels playing off ball, he can also, take those lead guard reps when Cade Cunningham is on the bench, or maybe they're looking just to run different actions against opposing defenses. So I'm really excited to see, what Jaden Ivey looks like this upcoming season, especially in these preseason games coming up in a few months, and how he looks in training camp as well. I think this is a very big year for Ivey, especially with him being eligible to get extended by the Detroit Pistons. And the Pistons have said, we want to keep both Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey. We're pretty confident that we can get deals done with them in the long-term future. We talked about that, I believe, last week or maybe 2 weeks ago. These days are going by so fast. It'll be the season before we know it. I just know it because the summer is just so damn short. But I'm glad Brian did kind of mention how dynamic of a player Jaden Ivey is. And you guys know me. I feel like I'm probably one of the more positive Pistons podcasters when it comes to Jaden Ivey. I feel like me and Eric Vincent are probably like the Jaden Ivey fan club stands over here. We just believe in the talent. We believe in the potential and just the way that he just approaches the game. But I do want to transition over to another Brian Windhorst clip. And this was him talking about what they could possibly do at the trading deadline in terms of upgrading the roster.
The other thing I'll say is they are a team that is upwardly mobile. If they've got a lot of flexibility and they have a draft capital, they are a team that could go hunting for a midseason upgrade. Now they have to pay these young guys. They already paid Cade. They have to sign Ivy. They don't have to, but to extend Ivy. Yeah. So they may be careful about that. But this contract they gave to Duncan Robinson is one of the more interesting ones we've seen in a while because it was reported, 3 years, like 48 million, but it's extremely flexible. It's guaranteed this year. And then the next 2 years, 15 million each year is non-guaranteed. So if he's great, they can hold on to him. If they spend a bunch of money and need to clear the cap off, they can just let him go.
So there's a couple things he said, and we discussed this last week with Wes Davenport and Blake Silverman from the Detroit Bad Boys. Kind of just looking at the contracts, looking at the guys on the roster. Like the Pistons have a lot of stackable contracts to actually go out and try to acquire a big fish because the salaries are a little bit larger and they can match. So what Brian is saying is like, mid-season, hypothetically, let's just kind of play this game. Like, let's say the Pistons are, I don't know, 6th seed. They may look to put a couple of their chips on the table to make a mid-season upgrade. Now, what position is it going to be? I don't know. I think I've been kind of pretty consistent with the power forward talk. I feel like if they get more consistent depth at power forward, this team can really take off. Now, I don't know what power forwards are available. I know people have mentioned Laurie Markkinen. Jared Jackson Jr. just got locked down, so I doubt Memphis is really moving on from him. There are some other power forwards out there. I just can't really think of them off the top of my head right now. But, if the Pistons are in a position where they're kind of in a similar seeding as last season, they could look to make that mid-season upgrade. And I think he also mentioned the Duncan Robinson contract. Like when that contract first came out, I think a lot of us were like, that's a lot of money. But then the details came out and it's only guaranteed for 1 year. So, if it works out and the Pistons are, pretty pleased with Duncan Robinson, they'll probably keep him. But if they're not too pleased with him and they feel like there's a player out there, or maybe they want to, just extend guys and it might, cost them more money, they could cut them. So I think the Pistons have a lot of flexibility. They also have their draft capital, which we haven't had in several years, which I'm kind of glad Troy Weaver made that Isaiah Stewart trade, because I can only imagine what type of trade he could have made if those firsts were actually available. Can you imagine if like our firsts were available like during that rebuild, during the Troy era? Yeah, I don't want to imagine that. I mean, we just saw what New Orleans did with Atlanta, and going up 10 spots to get Derek Queen, and then trading one of their unprotected first to Atlanta this upcoming draft. And this draft is actually pretty damn good. It's even better than last year's draft in 25. There's a lot of young prospects that look very promising. So Pistons could look to make that big splash that a lot of us have just been anticipating. I've told you guys in multiple podcasts that it's going to come. I think they're in a good position right now with their core. They got their franchise guy. They have first-round picks available. So that big move is coming sooner than later, you guys. It really is. Now, the Pistons announced today their preseason schedule. So let me put the preseason schedule on the screen and we'll go over it really quick. So the first game is going to be in Memphis. It's on October 6th at 8 p.m. So the Pistons will be making their preseason debut in 2025 against the Grizz. So maybe we'll be able to see Jaron Jackson Jr., Santi Aldama, John Morant in this game. Should be a good game. Then they have the Milwaukee Bucks on the 9th. The time for that is TBD. We don't know yet. There's some scheduling stuff they have to kind of iron out, work out. If I had to guess, it's probably like around 7 or 8. So get to see Giannis, the newly acquired Miles Turner, maybe. Public enemy number 1, Cole Anthony, is on the Bucks now. So maybe a little bit of revenge there from the Pistons. I don't really know if any Pistons actually have a grudge against Cole Anthony. I feel like us fans have a grudge against them just because you ruined Jaden Ivey's season last year. But get to see the Bucks on the 9th. On the 14th, we get to play the Cleveland Cavaliers at 7 p.m. October 14th. I feel like we play the Cavs every preseason. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like they're always on the schedule. You get to see possibly Lonzo Ball. They lost Ty Jerome. No more Isaac Okoro. But they're their roster's pretty much intact. They still have Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, and all those guys. I don't know if they'll be playing because it's the third preseason game. They might kind of shut down a couple other guys and just kind of gear up for the upcoming season. But if that is the third game, then it's another away game. And the final preseason game for the Pistons is October 16th at 7 p.m. at home at LCA against the Washington Wizards. It's kind of weird. A lot of these teams in the NBA right now have kind of 2-2. They have 2 home games, 2 away games. Pistons have 3 road games and 1 home game. I don't really know what happened with the scheduling there, but I'm excited, man. Like preseason basketball, I think is like 62 days away. If I did the math right in my head, probably not. I was pretty bad at math. But I'm excited. I think there's a lot of storylines that I'll be paying attention to in the preseason, particularly with our second round picks, Chaz Lanier. How does he look in the preseason? Is he ready for rotational minutes, or is he going to be just a really deep bench piece and possibly, play with the Motor City Cruise? How does Donis Jenkins look? How does Bobby Klitman look in the preseason? Can he have a good camp? Can he have a good preseason? Could he possibly get rotation minutes at backup power forward? How does Ron look in his second year? There's just so many questions and storylines we'll probably be paying attention to 2 months from now. But I'm really excited that we did get this preseason schedule released. It's kind of weird we only got 1 home game, but hey, it's whatever. Maybe I'll go to the Washington game. We'll probably not play any starters, and it'll just be a bunch of training camp guys and G League guys that we probably won't see much of. But hey, it should probably be fun, right? Want to end the podcast today with a clip from Jaden Ivey. He had his basketball camp last weekend, and this is a clip of him kind of playing one-on-one with some kids that attended his camp. No, it was really short, about 17 seconds, but in that clip from the camp that he hosted, it's good to see him out on the basketball court, you guys. And it was really cool to see him dunk. I think a lot of us had a lot of questions about, is he going to lose his athleticism? He looks a lot more healthy than he looked, during April, during May, during the playoffs, because, there was still like kind of like a glimmer of hope that Jaden Ivey could possibly come back if the Pistons won their first round matchup against the New York Knicks. Like that's what like kind of like was whispered. If the Pistons beat the Knicks, he was supposed to get reevaluated, and there's a possibility that he could come back. But I was encouraged, to see him, hooping with some campers out there at the in Pontiac at the UWM Sports Complex. Giving back to the kids in Michigan, I think is so cool. I feel like there's a lot of players in the NBA that do their camps, but they're usually not in Michigan, because a lot of these players that we have drafted are from different states. Like, Cade had his camp. I know Jalen Durr and Isaiah Stewart have their camps in their respected states, and, Washington and New York. But really cool by JI to do one here locally in Michigan, and, kind of giving back to the kids and spending time with them, and just playing one-on-one with them. He looked good, man. I really missed watching him, this past season. Hopefully, he can have a healthy season and put it all together. And, we have a backcourt that we could come up here and discuss and kind of see the progression with him. But it looks a lot better. Looks like he's getting healthier and healthier day by day. But that's all we have for today's podcast, you guys. Let me know what you guys think of the ESPN segment, talking about the Pistons, Jaden Ivey, and some possible trades. The preseason schedule. How do you feel that the Pistons have 3 road games and 1 home game? And when I saw that, I was like, wow, really? Here we go again. And Jaden Ivey. how he looked out there with the kids at that camp that he did host last weekend. I do want to end the podcast with this. So we're having a 2-guest podcast on Thursday. And you guys both know these guys, Sean Murphy and Eric Vincent. I'm going to get both of them on the podcast at once. I'm just warning you guys now, it's probably going to be a longer one, and it's going to be a fun one. Love those two guys. Can't say I've really had both of them on the podcast with myself at the same time. We did a roundtable. If you guys caught that last year, that was a lot of fun. We're going to have both of those guys on the pod on Thursday. Should be a really good episode. Definitely tap in if you guys do have the time. It's going to be at 7:00 Thursday night. But see you guys on Thursday. Hope you guys have a great night. And until next time, go Pistons. Peace.